Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to cover another one of PlayStation 5's exclusive launch titles, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, and see how it compares both visually and from a gameplay perspective to the previous entry to the LittleBigPlanet franchise, LittleBigPlanet 3. Now, before we get started, I want to clarify that Sackboy: A Big Adventure is not technically a new LittleBigPlanet game. Yes, it shares the same universe, style, and adorable mascot, but unlike LittleBigPlanet's signature Play, Create, Share motto, Sackboy: A Big Adventure is strictly a 3D platformer. Kinda in the same vein as Nintendo's Super Mario 3D World, with generally an isometric viewpoint, new controls, and possibly the biggest departure in the series to date, no create mode. That being said, there are some very interesting similarities in regards to the approach taken with the gameplay design, along with plenty of distinct changes that I wanted to go over so that you know exactly what you're getting into if you decide to pick this one up. For this analysis, Big Adventure is being played on the newly released PlayStation 5, while LittleBigPlanet 3 is being played on a mix of both the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4 Pro. Though, after looking through my footage, I noticed negligible differences in the quality between both platforms, suggesting that there's yet to be any sort of enhancements applied to this older title. For reference, Sackboy's Big Adventure utilizes a dynamic 4K resolution, with a locked 60 frames per second, while LittleBigPlanet 3 only outputs at 1080p, with a locked 30 frames per second. It's also important to note that Sackboy's Big Adventure is not limited to the PS5. So if you're waiting for a better price or just haven't managed to put in an order for the PS5, you can still pick the game up on PS4. Though you will be limited to 720p on the base PS4 or just 1080p on the PS4 Pro. No matter what platform you play on, you'll still be able to enjoy that smooth 60 frames per second performance, something that the series has been in desperate need of since the beginning. Alright, so let's kick this comparison off by first taking a brief look at the presentation, starting with the character models. Now at first glance, things look about the same between both games. Sackboy still sports a lot of the same scaling and general design, but there are a few enhancements hidden throughout that help to give Sackboy in the latest game a much cleaner look. First off, and probably one of the most notable improvements, is the texture quality. Sackboy's knitted wool texture is much sharper now, with more defined edges to each thread. You can easily notice this when looking at Sackboy's face, and when viewing these small threads used to stitch together his limbs. I also found that these particular white threads are much larger in this new game, and can be seen just barely holding his legs to his body, whereas before you could barely even see them. And then of course, there's that fuzz bordering the entire model. This was a really cool addition in LittleBigPlanet 3, as it helped to give a much more tangible appearance to Sackboy. But it also removes a bit of definition from the character. The effect remains in play in Sackboy's Big Adventure, but it has been toned down considerably. You'll notice the effect more when viewing the high-quality cutscenes, especially thanks to the excellent use of lighting that will light up each individual strand, but overall it's more subtle. Another change that has been made to Sackboy has more to do with the player interactivity and animations. One of the more goofy aspects of LittleBigPlanet is that you can use your controller to directly manipulate Sackboy's current expression. You can make him appear happy, sad, angry, or scared, and you can even wave his arms wildly using both joysticks to control each limb. Sackboy: A Big Adventure retains this feature, but has adjusted it just slightly, with different looking facial expressions, and a single rear trigger pull needed to initiate moving his arms around. You can also still use the motion sensor on the controller to move Sackboy's head around, but you can no longer click L3 to manipulate his body like you could in the old games. What's more, his hands no longer have specific animations tied to them based on the mood. In the past games, holding down the triggers completely would alter Sackboy's hands. In his default mood, he would point. When he was happy, he'd hold up a peace sign, sad, a thumbs down, angry, a fist, and when he's scared, his hands would shake along with his body. But all of these subtle animations have been removed from Sackboy: A Big Adventure, regardless of what mood the character is set in. To make up for this, you can now trigger several new unique emote animations, like dancing or showboating, which can be customized further with later unlocks. But before we get into all that, let's take a look at some of the updates made to Sackboy's wardrobe. As with any LittleBigPlanet game, players have access to a large collection of outfits to customize Sackboy with, including hats, eyes, textures, shirts, and accessories. But unlike almost every previous game, A Big Adventure does not retain the player's inventory. This means everything from LittleBigPlanet 1, 2, 3, and Vita have been left behind, and you'll be forced to start the game with a naked Sackboy instead. However, there are a few returning outfits that veteran players may recognize, including both of these Shakespearean outfits, the first two outfits unlocked in the very first game, this deep-sea diver costume that has been improved with more reflective metal shaders and enhanced shadow effects, and one of the more impressive updates, this lion costume, that now features a much larger lion mane composed of thousands of individual hair fibers that seem to move more naturally than the clumps of polygonal hair used in the old version. There's a few other familiar cosmetics hidden throughout, but for the most part, the latest game introduces players to all new outfits to discover, and there's a pretty decent amount of them to keep things interesting. What's annoying though is that instead of being able to switch between outfits mid-level, you're now forced to select from preset outfits at the level launch instead, and can only customize your look more precisely when visiting the in-game Zoom store. This is a really inconvenient design choice, and I wish you could customize on the fly like you used to be able to. It's also a shame Sumo Digital couldn't find a way to keep all those old outfits. But considering how many issues players have had in the past trying to transfer all that content from game to game, I don't necessarily blame them for wanting to start fresh here, especially considering this isn't technically a new LittleBigPlanet. Next up, let's talk environments. There's nothing quite as important to a LittleBigPlanet game than its environmental design. Everything about its unique charm and energy hinges on a level creator's understanding of how to mix together old household items and materials to craft something really unique and visually interesting. And every level offered in Sackboy: A Big Adventure demonstrates this general concept flawlessly. Each environment feels like it was pieced together on a tabletop, with some beautiful high-fidelity texture work to make each material really pop on the screen. The amount of detail in every frame of this game far exceeds anything you typically run into in LittleBigPlanet 3. Though that, of course, always hinged on the level creator's ability to decorate before. You can theoretically create incredibly detailed worlds in LittleBigPlanet using the robust level editing tool, and there's certainly examples of this in the online community, with some levels that feel significantly more detailed than even the ones offered by the developers themselves. But even the most talented level creators in the past games won't be able to replicate the sheer depth offered by this latest release. Each area is loaded with detail, from dynamic props like leaves, debris, and flags, to this really cool wool grass effect that even sends a distinct DualSense vibration to the player's controller when traversing through it. You'll even notice different materials bend realistically under the weight of Sackboy, only further adding to the illusion. Another key difference that you've probably already picked up on is the altered camera angle. LittleBigPlanet games traditionally are 2D platformers. There's some very complex tricks that can be applied in the later games to incorporate an isometric approach, but there's no way to replicate the more sophisticated 3D platforming design utilized in this latest game. Big Adventure plays more like Super Mario 3D World, with angled panning camera views that allow for much more background and distant environments to be visible at any moment. Again, LittleBigPlanet 3 can look beautiful depending on how creative you or a fellow creator can be, but there's really no textures available in that toolset that match the quality and complexity of what is being used in this latest title. Next up, we have lighting. This is another massive improvement that should stand out right away in Sackboy's A Big Adventure. Each level is beautifully lit, with some fantastic global illumination effects, along with some subtle use of volumetric god rays and bloom to really give the worlds a distinct warm glow. What's more, Big Adventure even utilizes some great screen space reflections throughout, which are most noticeable with the score bubbles and the many metal surfaces found throughout the game. It's a huge upgrade from the rather simplistic lighting utilized in the older LittleBigPlanet games, and I found it was impossible to replicate the look of this lighting, even when tweaking all the available ambient light settings and mixing it with various prop-based light effects. Like with the environment, you can still get some great light out of LittleBigPlanet 3, especially when balancing the colors and properly using the fog feature with things like spotlights. But balancing this with the game's unstable frame rates to ensure a smooth play experience can be a challenge, and it still doesn't come even close to matching the lighting in the new game. Shadows have also seen a big step up. While not the most notable feature in this series, shadows have often been problematic, as different camera angles and ambient light settings can cause them to glitch out often, providing a less than consistent appearance for your level designs. Big Adventure doesn't suffer from these issues and makes great use of variable shadow sharpness that is dependent on specific light sources, and you'll even find areas with multiple shadows at the same time, being affected by multiple sources of light. Then there's the effects. Effects have never really been this series' forte. Things like fire, water, and explosions generally come off as pretty generic, often opting for a realistic appearance but failing to really deliver. Instead of trying to continue this trend, Sackboy: A Big Adventure takes its crafted art style to a new level, and reimagines a lot of these effects. Water, for example, is now enhanced with thousands of glitter particles that, thanks to the bloom effects from the lighting design, help to simulate the look of waves. Fire is often more stylized as well, with a balanced use of flat cardboard cutouts of fire, cloth fire from things like tiki torches in the background, and on occasion some more realistic fireballs to help give the world lots of visual variety. And then there's the number of particles on screen. This has been upped substantially, with things like these small snowballs on the ground moving independently as the player traverses through them, or the large amount of confetti that will appear after completing a level. All in all, it's a massive step up visually from all the previous games in the series. Though, this of course is an expected improvement. So now, let's turn our attention to the even bigger changes that have been made to the gameplay design. So, as I've mentioned before, Sackboy: A Big Adventure greatly mixes up the LittleBigPlanet formula by being exclusively a 3D platformer. There's no pod hub area to decorate, no online community of planets to explore, and of course, none of LittleBigPlanet's signature creation options. This is a huge deal, as every single entry in the series has offered some form of creation, even a track editor in LittleBig Karting. But surprisingly, this decision to focus solely on the 3D platforming mechanics seems to have paid off nicely, as Big Adventure is a joy to play through. Every level is expertly crafted with some solid enemy designs, clever obstacles, and an abundance of unique gameplay mechanics, many of which have not been featured in previous entries. And it's all delivered with a brand new isometric view, as opposed to the traditional 2D design that the series typically goes with. So first, let's talk about the controls. In LittleBigPlanet 3, you can only perform a handful of moves. You can run left or right, jump in the air, wave your arms around, and latch onto anything deemed grabbable, usually soft spongy material. But Big Adventure gives the player a few more moves to play around with. Sackboy can still run and jump, and even grab onto spongy materials, but he can also swing a punch at enemies, and if you tap the circle button, you can roll around the level, which I've found to be useful to maintain speed in some instances. Sackboy can also balance across tight ropes and perform a new drop attack, which can be used to defeat stronger enemies or to break through cracks in the ground to uncover hidden secrets. The level goals have also seen a major overhaul. In the past games, you had 3 goals: reach the end of the level, do so without ever dying, or ace it, and find all the hidden prize bubbles, usually consisting of new outfit pieces or props to decorate your own levels. Big Adventure adds a lot more to do in each level. First, the score bubbles, used before only to track yourself on a leaderboard against other players, are now part of 3 distinct score challenges, making them more valuable than ever. Points can be earned by picking up bubbles or defeating enemies, and these points can be doubled when picking up the special ×2 token in the environment. Also new to Big Adventure are the blue Dreamer orbs. Each level offers between 3 to 5 of these orbs, and they're often hidden pretty well, either off the beaten path or in special bonus rooms with a unique challenge inside. There's even some orbs that need to be pieced together by finding each of its 5 pieces. With Dreamer orbs, score challenges, and all the previous goals like acing the level, finding prize bubbles, and reaching the end, each level in Big Adventure is more involved than any of the main campaign levels in LittleBigPlanet 3, making the replay value even higher. And what's even better is that Big Adventure's campaign is probably the longest in the series' history. There's 5 stages, each loaded with enjoyable levels that all offer something different. One level will have you swinging using the old grapple hook, while the next will feature a scrolling camera and a gauntlet of enemies and platforming obstacles to contend with. There's even some fantastic new music-based levels thrown in, featuring tracks like Bruno Mars's Uptown Funk or Kool and the Gang's Jungle Boogie, that has each obstacle tied directly to the beat of each musical phrase, similar to the music-based levels in Rayman Legends. Then there's the boss fights, that are much more involved thanks to the less limited viewpoint and improved control scheme. And they do a great job of testing what the players learn throughout each particular stage. For players looking for an even greater challenge, there's the new Knitted Night Trials, which are unlocked by discovering a special Rubik's Cube item hidden in some of the levels. These trials all take place in a weird space setting, with very simple looking platforms and obstacles. But the very strict time requirements and multiple routes to and from the end goal will require very precise maneuvers, along with a great understanding of the roll technique to successfully earn the gold trophy. On top of this, each stage also features multiple cooperative-only levels to play, either using multiple controllers on one console or online with up to 4 players. The co-op play is handled about the same as the past games, with a shared screen and an automatic respawn for players that fall behind. But the increased viewpoint of each location makes this much less problematic than before. And competing for the first place trophy and getting the coveted winner's photo at the end makes this game's co-op the best I've played in the series to date. Though sadly, there's no mini-games, competitive or otherwise, something that always offered a nice break in the old titles. But there's at least the occasional zoom bonus rooms that appear on the map screen, that give players a chance to earn some extra collectibles to spend at the cosmetic shop. There's a few other features that I think I'm gonna miss from LittleBigPlanet 3. The biggest change is the removal of Sackboy's friends, Oddsock, Swoop, and Toggle. These were a really clever addition to the game, as they offered some solid change-ups to the gameplay design, though they were still fairly underutilized and felt more like sample levels of what could be done with the Level Creator Suite. With the new gameplay design, it kinda makes sense that these 3 didn't make the cut, as their unique capabilities, especially Oddsock's, were tailor-made for that 2D platforming design. Though I do hope we see them return sometime in the future, as they were probably one of the more interesting aspects of the 3rd game. Another big departure is the gadget wheel. LittleBigPlanet 3 introduced a handful of new tools to overcome obstacles, like boost boots, the blink ball, and this helmet used to ride across rails. Big Adventure doesn't seem to bring back any of these items, but it does offer a few new things to play around with, like this hamster ball that could be flung across the environment. But these gadgets are only available at set locations to guarantee a solid flow to the gameplay on a per level basis. And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Overall, I think despite its pretty large departure from the core LittleBigPlanet series, Sackboy: A Big Adventure is a confident 3D platformer experience on its own. The presentation is absolutely gorgeous, and getting it all to run at a dynamic 4K resolution with a rock-solid 60 frames per second was a great choice. The smoother frame rate and sharper visual design gives this game an unmistakable next-gen look, at least when compared to the previous iterations in this franchise. And the smoother platforming controls and more robust level designs do a great job of fleshing out an aspect of LittleBigPlanet that has always come up short. It's certainly not perfect. The jumping feels a bit floaty, and the camera angle can make things like combat feel a bit awkward at times. But more often than not, the game is a joy to play through, and is another solid addition to the PlayStation 5's available launch lineup. I just hope that we'll see an actual entry to the LittleBigPlanet series in the future that comes with all the great new ideas introduced here, along with the return of the all-important Creator Mode, that I'm sure many fans will be very disappointed to see missing in this latest game. But what do you guys think? Are you impressed with Sackboy: A Big Adventure, or do you still prefer LittleBigPlanet 3? Which entry to the series has been your favorite overall? Let me know in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos covering next-gen games posted every week.